So let's get started. My name is Andy Engin Utkan. I'm a Salesforce MVP with 20 certifications. I am a consultant as well on the platform. I run a website called salesforcebreak.com and several resources related to teaching flows. I have a Udemy course and I run a bootcamp course that's 6 weeks long. If you would like to get access to a free knowledge assessment exam, go to flow-canvas.com and you are going to get access to a 60-question exam that will assess your flow knowledge skills. Now, today I have with me two valuable guests. Josh Dayment is with Salesforce. He is a solution architect, senior solution architect, and Eric Smith is with Rafter1. He's a technical architect. And they are both very valuable resources and contributors to UnofficialSF.com. And you may be wondering, if you have not used UnofficialSF.com before, what that site is. And we are going to go into that today and give you a lot of information around what the site already hosts. So Josh, welcome today. Can you please introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, my name is Josh Dayment. I'm a solution architect at Salesforce in our professional services group. I am based in Arizona. I have 13 certifications, I think. That's funny, I forgot the number. Yeah, I'm a big flow fan. I love developing components for flows as well. Not only do I have components on UnofficialSF.com, also do have one on the AppExchange as well via Salesforce Labs called Data Fetcher. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk about UnofficialSF and everything that we do as part of that program, and how it can get other people contributing, and excited about it.
Welcome, Josh. And Eric, welcome as well. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Thanks. I'm Eric Smith. As you mentioned, I'm a technical architect with Rafter1. Rafter1 is a Salesforce consulting partner. I've been involved in Salesforce for maybe 10 years or so, but I've been involved in technology for well over 40 years. Having a great time doing what I'm doing now. Love UnofficialSF.com. It's a great place to learn, get information, and share information. I'm always one that I've been fairly stubborn. If Salesforce didn't do something for me, I tried to figure out a way to make it happen or make it do something. And when I do something like that, sometimes I call myself, maybe I call myself lazy because I don't want to have to redo something again in the future. So I might put a little extra effort in the first time around to create something that's going to be a little more flexible or configurable than what my immediate use case might be. But in doing so, I like to do that not just for myself, but make these types of components and code available to other people as well. So it's grown quite a bit from when I first started doing this, and just love seeing the interest and hearing back from folks of how they've put a lot of these components into their own use cases. So happy to be here.
Cool. So I prepared a couple of questions for you, and I'll start with Josh. What solutions are available on UnofficialSF.com, Josh?
Yeah, so on UnofficialSF.com, we have solutions around flow components. Primarily, framework we're looking at right now are going to be Lightning Web Components to use in Flow, but there are some Aura components that are out there that we haven't converted yet. There's also solutions around external services, Lightning record pages, how-tos, several wiki documents. Just overall, I think it's a big, great place to kind of learn both development around primarily flow, but automation as a whole. We have a lot of resources that are available to the community, just to kind of go and learn and enhance automation in general.
That's really cool. I visit that site quite often, and I used a number of solutions there. And Eric, would you like to add to that? What kind of solutions are there?
Well, I'll pop a quick slide up on the screen here. I think Josh covered most
Awesome.
of the things that are there, but really there's a wealth of information out there. As we mentioned, we got flow screen components, flow actions, special collections of actions, page components, utilities, but is some really good documentation there as well that can really help supplement or extend what you might find with some of the standard Salesforce documentation. And then it's not just flow. There's a number of other areas that are covered on this website as well, and I've listed a few of those here. Flow orchestrator, next best actions, schedulers, surveys. There's some good information on Service Cloud. It's a very interesting place to go in and kind of poke around and see what you can uncover or find out there, and hopefully will help you be able to do that a little easier today after you go through this presentation.
Yes, and my next question is going to be, because you've shown us quite a number of solutions that are available on this website, blogs, knowledge articles. So how do we find what we're looking for, Eric?
Well, let's start with the actual homepage itself, which is, if you go to UnofficialSF.com, you'll see this page. There's a few different areas. We talked about things like next best action, orchestration, utilities, some of these other things. But the important one here is if you click on flow, either up on top or right here on the page. If you click on flow, you're going to go to a page that's got a lot of resources here. If over on the right-hand side, you'll see a series of blog posts that people have added. And the most recent one is always going to be on top, and you can always pick up new information there or scroll through and see what different articles people have posted recently. But to find out more information on what components are out there, there's 3 links right here: installable flow screen components, actions, and then base packs. And if you click on screen components or actions, it takes you to a table of contents for those. And I've tried to maintain these as a table of contents, try to keep them up to date as I contribute new versions and new components. I try and make sure that they're in here and up to date. If somebody else releases a new component or a new version, I'll try and go in and keep this as up to date as possible. So, for example, on flow screen components, we see an alphabetical list with a description of a lot of the different components that are available, a general type of whether it's data or user interface, navigation, input, those type of things, along with the latest update and latest versions. And you could sort these as well. So if you wanted to look at just things of a display type, you could sort this by that. If you just wanted to see what was new, what was the newest, you could sort by date and see the most recent releases for various components. And that's all right here in the table of contents. If you click on one of the items, you're more interested in a particular component, for example, the data table component, you can click on that. And these will typically take you to a page that has documentation and more information about the individual components. Not all the pages are standardized, but we've tried more and more to get these as standardized as possible, where you'll see usually at the top the most recent version and most recent date that one of these articles was updated, as well as links to the package installation links to the source code, and other things there. So a lot of these articles will give you more information about the individual components and how you can use them. So that was one example there, looking at the table of contents for screen components. We have the same thing for actions. And actions are things that elements you can add to a flow that will do some type of processing for you. This would be outside of the flow screen, but an actual action itself. And again, we've got an alphabetical list of what the various actions are. You can click on any of those. It'll take you right to that page. Here's an example here, one that allows you to go out, check validations. You get information about the component, directions on how to use it, sample use cases. And typically at the bottom of these articles, you will see your installation links, whether you want to put it in a production or developer org or a sandbox. And typically you will also see release notes of newer versions that come out over time, what type of changes were made and what versions they were when they changed. And then typically at the very bottom, you will see a link to go right to the source code. And most all of the source code is stored on GitHub. And you can go in and see how somebody may have created the various components. And if you're curious about how the magic was done on some of these, you can jump right in. You can look at the source code and see how these things were created, and hopefully learn something from there, or even pick up bits and pieces for projects that you're doing on your own with your own code. So
that's very nice.
That's a good way to maybe learn a little bit about how some of these things were created.
Great overview. Thank you, Eric. And I want to go to Josh and ask, this is actually a nice segue into the types of packaging we see here. I mean, are all these solutions free? Are there, like here, unmanaged packages, links to AppExchange solutions? What kind of solutions do we have here? And what are the considerations for the people who are consuming these packages when they are implementing it into their Salesforce orgs, Josh?
Sure. One thing I want to note real quick before I lose that thought is Eric had kind of discussed like how you can go into GitHub and learn how all of those things happen. That's really kind of how I started my developer journey, funny enough, was via like UnofficialSF.com. That's kind of like how I started to learn how to develop and build a lot of these components, because when I was an admin, I used the components and then there might have been something that I thought was missing. So I wanted to see how it worked. So I just want to encourage like so many people to go in there.
Well, I think if any, I agree. If anybody wants to learn how to be a developer, there's one very, very important skill you need to learn. The very first skill you need to learn to be a developer, and that's how do you copy and paste.
Exactly.
And I love the way your faces light up when you start talking about the code and how you develop it. It's just great.
Yeah, but as far as like how everything is available on the site itself, so everything, I'm going to say probably about 95% of what we have on there has some type of package to where you can install it directly inside of an org. There might be a few legacy components here and there where it's just the code that sits in GitHub with a link to it. And then there are some vendors that have linked posts where there might be a paid service via the AppExchange on the site as well. But that's all called out really well in the accompanying blog posts that go with it. The packages that we have available through the repo, those are primarily packaged using an unmanaged package. We are using second generation packaging right now, so that means that we can upgrade easily. One caveat, there might be we were just talking about this before we all started, we might have developed something 3-4 years ago that just hasn't gotten any love. So that might be on an older package version that's not upgradable. So sometimes there are a little bit of hiccups there when we do make a change and we need to upgrade that package in your orgs. But I think almost all of us are pretty responsive in helping you troubleshoot those issues. Differences between AppExchange, what you're going to see like on UnofficialSF is UnofficialSF, think of it as open source. We all contribute on there in our off time. So our security reviews, our code reviews are our own. So we do our best to make it secure, and sometimes we aren't doing something that is a full security, might not be in user mode, for example. When I introduce a package into the AppExchange, it's generally going to be running in user mode versus something that's going to be running in system mode, things like that. But what we're able to offer through UnofficialSF is speed to market, really. So like one one of the components I have is Text Area Plus. I worked on Nathan Schulman. That came as a result of somebody in Ohana Slack going, "Hey, I have this problem," and Nathan and I thought it would be really cool just to kind of solve that problem. And the quickest way we could get the solution out there was via Unofficial SF. AppExchange can take a little bit longer to get something out there, just with all the security reviews and package versions and things like that. It's all dependent on your org, your specific use case when we talk about things like that. But what's really cool about Unofficial SF, like I said, is it's all primarily open source. So if I build something and Eric's like, "Hey, this functionality would be really cool," Eric just does a pull request and updates it, and we send out a new package and it's done. And it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody that's currently contributing. And if he said like, "Hey, I made this quick change, this is a great enhancement," we'll pull request and update it, get a new package out, and it's available at that time.
Yes. Thank you very much, Josh. Let me add for our audience who may not be knowledgeable about different packages and their implications. Now we have AppExchange solutions that go through the security review, and they are supported by the creators of that AppExchange solution. And they are going to receive new versioning, right? They can be receiving new versioning through the developers. And we have actually Salesforce Lab solutions. Salesforce Lab solutions are usually created by Salesforce employees like yourself, Josh, but they are not really fully rolled out in the sense of other AppExchange solutions. They are not really supported by Salesforce if there is some kind of problem with the solution that's being provided. And then we have these solutions that are unmanaged packages, usually that are offered on Unofficial SF, open source solutions, where unless you are going to go in and receive the latest version and install it into your org, you're not going to receive the new version. So it is recommended for you to kind of test everything in your sandbox along with your own code and manage the unmanaged packages in your org, and then kind of with every release do an update possibly with the updated components that are offered on Unofficial SF. I mean, is that correct, Eric? What would you like to add there?
Yeah, I think I think with the open source and the open community, we do see a much faster turnaround for fixes and enhancements. There's no official voting for things like you have on the AppExchange, but people do vote with their downloads and with their feedback. So we see some components are very, very widely used. We get great feedback on those and enhancement requests as well. And those type of especially enhancements can happen fairly quickly in this environment, and new versions can come out all the time for some, and everybody can then take advantage of them.
Yes, and one question I wanted to ask you is the base component, I think, is also available on the AppExchange versus the website. And what's the difference there? Which one should we use? Do you have a recommendation?
On the base packs, one of the concerns that was out there originally was that, well, this is a lot of code that is used by a lot of these other components, but it's not on the AppExchange, or it hadn't gone through the security review. And the flow actions base packs are released as a managed package. And there is an AppExchange version of that as well that people can install, but it's not as up to date because it has to go through the whole review every time a change needs to go through there. But to talk about that a little bit, there's two base packs that are there, and it's really to provide and avoid duplicating functionality. So when a developer is creating some of these components, we're trying not to have everybody have to recreate the same type of functionality every time a new component is released. So we see some of the screen-based packs are components that are used a lot in what's called the custom property editors. And a custom property editor is a way that a developer can configure and create the component to allow you to put your attributes in and configure it for your own use. So it's a way of it's almost like a whole nother component that's used to configure the component. And a lot of these items that are in the base pack are used by the developers that are creating these custom property editors. And then there's the flow actions base pack, and that is just about all of the Apex classes that are used, again, reused on a lot of these other components. And one of the reasons, actually, there were two primary reasons for putting that out there as a managed package. One is if you install Apex from a managed package, it does not affect any limits that you have in your org as to the amount of Apex code you can have in your org. So there was a few fairly large components that were being used, and as an unmanaged package, people with smaller limits in their orgs were finding that, wow, this is using up a lot of my limits. Is there a way to avoid that? And by doing a managed package, that avoids that completely. And the other benefit of having this base pack out there is that it doesn't interact with or interfere with any specialized validation rules you may have when these Apex test classes run on the code. Oftentimes you'll see a generic test class for an Apex class could trip up some custom validation rules that somebody may have in their org. And by including these test classes with the Apex in a managed package, it keeps those two completely separate, and you don't have that issue of causing any problems with any custom validation rules you may have. So there's some real benefits there to have these base packs there for the purposes that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, and they give you a lot of functionality right out of the gate. I mean, you have some components already available for you to use, and like you said, on top of that, all the other developers that develop on top of those packages can leverage those solutions as well, right? Thank you very much for the explanation.
Yep.
And Josh, could you? I mean, you contributed. You just told us how you got started. You contributed quite a bit on several solutions that are listed now on UnofficialSF. So what have you done so far? Can you tell us what was the process like?
Yeah, so I could kind of start like I said, the very first thing that I had ever contributed on, I had to go back and look leading up to this call to see what my first pull request was into the repo. And funny enough, it was a contribution to add in I think some font or something to the older input rich text component.
Yeah.
Because at the time it was, had a few options that you could use for rich text, and what a lot of people don't know, a lot of the components that we see in Flow are all based off of the Lightning components on the Lightning design system. So
yeah,
being the nerd that I am, I went and looked at the GitHub repo and I was like, how does this work? Just wanted to tinker, started reading how it worked, found Lightning design, and I was like, oh, we just need to add this attribute in here. So added that attribute, worked in my dev box, and found out about how to submit that change. And then from there, just kind of like kicked off like other ideas as I was working as an admin. And then so after that, I created quite a few components. I've created a barcode scanner for flows. So if you have the Salesforce mobile app or mobile publisher, you can embed a scanner in your screen flows to where if I have a QR code or really kind of almost any kind of barcode, I can scan that and return that data back to my flow to do things. I have a carousel component that rotates images or text in a carousel in a screen flow. I have Flow Flex cards, volunteered to help out with that one after Alex came up with the idea. It's become pretty popular. Flow Flex cards basically takes a collection of records, displays data on those individual records, and then you can actually launch actions. Actions are AKA subflows from each individual card to perform actions on those specific records. As well as select records and store those IDs either in a single text variable or text collection variable and perform actions on those collection of records further downstream in your flow. I started file upload improved. First version of that was just showing the files that are actually uploaded in your file upload component, but give credit to Ryan Mercer on that one. Really kind of brought file upload improved to where it is today. And then I added a custom property editor to that, which I'm a big fan of custom property editors. I just think makes life so much easier for admins and developers that are developing flows when we're using those components. Text Area Plus, I discussed earlier with Nathan Schulman. That one was a community sourced option of just hey, I'd love to see a counter on a text component as people are entering text, and that's turned into a one all solution now for text and flows. Is kind of like how I proposed that. What else? I have auto navigate for flow. So you can set a specific time period that you have a screen open. And once that timer hits down, it auto navigates your flow or it closes your flow. So for those scenarios where you have a user that has a flow open, leave that screen open and they walk away and you know what? I don't want that flow interview stay stuck in my system. I want that to just finish. You can set a timer to close out your flows for your screen flows. And then little unknown ones, I also have an iframe for flow. So if I want to iframe a website into a screen flow, have that component as well. Let me see if I missed anything.
I did not know that one, for example. Like you never know how many solutions are out there. And Josh, you and I interact quite a bit, and I see you on the ecosystem platforms. And sometimes you come in and answer a question, and you say, like, you know what, I wrote that component, or I led the efforts on that component. Use Text Area Plus. What kind of a feeling is that? That must be very rewarding, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's always fun. Like I definitely have an interesting Salesforce journey. Like I spent over 15 years in the Army jumping out of airplanes. Like that's what I did. I was an infantryman, and then I entered in. Then I worked in sales after I got out, and then eventually fell into an admin role. So I have like no tech background, and to be able to see think about like my own journey, like in the ecosystem, and like to where I've had zero tech training outside of like Salesforce and the background and like learning and developing, and now seeing so many people benefiting from stuff that I've done. Like it's always a rewarding experience.
Cool. Yeah. And thank you for your service. Yeah. Josh is a veteran.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to come to Eric, and Eric, probably the list is going to be very long, Eric. Thank you very much for your contributions. What have you contributed to on Unofficial SF? Or maybe should we just say, like, what have you not touched, right?
Well, let's get a visual aid here. So like Josh, I started looking at some of the components that Alex Elstein had put out there originally and said, oh, this does almost what I want, but I need to tweak it a little more. And so here's a list of some of the common components out there that I've actually gone in. I didn't create them originally, but I've gone in and made, numerous enhancements to them and added things to them. Probably a couple of the more popular ones is the lookup component, which we now call quick lookup. And this one gave the ability to have lookups on a screen be dependent upon other lookups, which was something that the standard lookup component in Flow could not do. Navigation button, that's very popular. Navigate everywhere, navigate to record. These are all things where you could have a flow redirect to other records, and like you create a new record and then you want to go to that record when you're done. Show toast, added a lot of capability to a simple little toast component that's there. Quick choice is a really interesting one that was originally just started as a pick list, and that's all it did. And then some of the improvements that I worked on were with the ability to have it recognize record types, so you only saw pick list values that matched the record type for the record you're on, and also the ability to do what's called a visual card. So now you see a lot of times somebody might have a large card with a logo or an image or something on their screen for various selections, and that's all built around the quick choice component with the ability to display a pick list as a card format, which is kind of neat. added one or two things to the rich text input that you folks have started on, and then worked on various collection actions as well. So those are just some of the ones that I've gone in and enhanced. I've also created a number of components, utilities, page components. Probably one of the first ones I did, and I actually originally did this as an Aura component. This is back before Lightning Web components were even a thing, and that was data table.
That's a popular one, yeah.
Yeah, actually, some of these components, lookup, data table, and some of the collection components and other ones originally were never part of Flow. And based on the popularity of these components on Unofficial SF, it helped drive the development efforts on the Salesforce side to say, hey, well, using these actions, using these components, let's try and make that a standard part of what we offer. And I think, a lot of what's done here on Unofficial SF is driving that action. So data table is something I created because all we had available to pick records was the dynamic record choice. And the problem with dynamic record choice was you could only show one field out of a record to make a choice. I said, I need to show multiple fields, and I want to do it so it's organized in a tabular format. So I created data table. And then when at one point they said, well, now we're going to do away with Aura. You need to rewrite it as a Lightning Web component. So that was a good learning experience for me in Lightning Web components, was to move that over. And then when custom property editors came along, I actually created a custom property editor for the data table that actually it does something really interesting. Is it uses itself to configure itself. In other words, my custom property editor for data table uses the data table for the user to interact with, to change headings and column widths and all sorts of things. That it takes that interaction that somebody is doing with the table and then puts that out there as your attributes for the component. That particular component, I think the last time I checked, data table had been installed in over 80,000 Salesforce orgs.
Wow.
So it's there is a standard data table out there now, but there's a lot of things that the standard one doesn't do yet that this component does, like inline editing and a number of things like that.
Yes.
But some of the other ones there that people may or may not be familiar with, simple ones like copy to a clipboard button. We can put text on a screen and just throw a button on there if you want to copy it into a clipboard. A lot of people do swivel chair work from Salesforce to another system and back again. And that's just an easy way to put some stuff on a flow and say, click this button, and then you can go to your other app and paste it in there. Draw a line. That's a real simple one. Just being able to put a line somewhere on the screen, different width, different color. Validation checker is an interesting one that I created that a lot of times if a flow fails because of a duplicate or a required field isn't filled out, or it fails a validation rule, or any number of reasons, what happens is you get this strange error message, the flow crashes, and your user's there, trying to call you up on the phone or email you saying it broke. The validation checker gives you the ability as an admin creating a flow to say, before I write this record or update this record, go tell me if there's going to be any validation issues. Are there going to be any problems? And if there are, and you find out what those problems are, and you can control that in your flow and present a different face to your users rather than just a weird error message and the flow stopping. So that's a handy one to have. Get records in. That's one. That was probably one of my shortest lived components out there. As I mentioned, some of these components, once they're here, became part of the standard part of Flow. I think I released that one a week before one of the Salesforce releases that actually introduced that as a standard action. But this one does one thing that doesn't do. You can provide a collection of records and specify a field and say, give me all the records that match this field in this other collection of records. Which kind of saves you a few steps in your flow.
Yeah, it does.
And then probably the most recent thing I've been working on is we have a bunch of these collection processes which do all these different actions on collections of records. But now with reactive screens, I wanted the ability to do that type of processing in the screen while somebody's on the screen, rather than having to click next, go out of the screen, go do your actions, and then come back. is I've come up with a way to turn actually any invocable flow action into a reactive screen component. So I've converted a number of these already, that these are all reactive screen components that actually call and invoke that original invocable action, but it does it while you're in your flow screen. So
That's awesome.
Output from one component could drive inputs to another one, combined with Josh's data fetcher, you can do some really, really interesting things all on a single screen. Over on the right-hand side, you see there's some utilities that I've created. One was an app switcher, where somebody can quickly switch between apps, but stay on the same record when they switch, which by default, you can't do that. If you switch apps in Salesforce, you have to go and find your original record again if you're jumping back and forth. I created a flow menu, a utility to import and export flows between orgs, a batch delete. That's a one. If anybody has spent any time trying to delete inactive versions of flows, or even process builders, was 10 times worse. Very, very time consuming process. This is a way to go in there and select a whole bunch of inactive versions at once, click a button, and they'll all go and be deleted for you all at once. So there's some other ones there, some page components that are helpful when you're building record pages. So there's a lot to go in and explore when you're focused on Unofficial SF.
Thank you. And Josh, I don't think you finished your list. Did you talk about the data fetcher? I think I ended up interrupting you.
I don't think I touched on it. That is the one component I have on the AppExchange. So data fetcher is a component, like I said, on the AppExchange, designed for reactive screen flows. Primarily could be used outside of reactive, but the fun part is the reactive portion of it. So what I like to, how I describe it is, it's a headless Lightning Web component that you can put in your screen. So headless as in, it's never going to display the component itself when it's used in the screen. But what it allows you to do is perform SQL queries right now. So I can do standard object query language search. So for example, I could do select ID name from account, and that's going to return the name of, it's going to return all of the account records and their name along with their ID into a record collection, which I could then pass on to the data table, whether out of the box or Eric's. I could pass it into the FlexCard component from UnofficialSF.com that I also developed as well, or I could use that collection further downstream in my flow. What's really unique is that with formulas being reactive, my SQL string could be a formula in my flow that also reacts to other inputs. So whether that's a text input, it could be something from a quick choice, from a pick list, where, if I want to, it could even be a single ID string. So if I wanted to say select ID name from account where ID is equal to, I could actually have the output from a lookup component, where if a user looks up that component, where let's say I look up a contact, I can return the account into maybe the record detail component, things like that. A lot of different scenarios out there.
And this is all happening within the same screen as a response to the user selecting something different, right? Like when they change their selection, it can actually go query the cloud and then bring the response and then show it on the screen, which is huge compared to previous screen flows.
Yeah, it's a super fun component. It's interesting. As far as I haven't looked recently, similar like Eric, but when we look at orgs that have prior to this last release, when I looked at orgs where they had opted into reactivity, and production orgs, data fetcher is being used in over half of the orgs opted into reactivity. A little bit harder to tell right now because everybody's opted in on API on Winter 24, but I'm pushing a little bit over 2,000 installs right now for data fetcher from the AppExchange. And then I do, because that is listed under Salesforce Labs, and it is on the AppExchange, I do I do offer an office hours for that for people that are interested and are lost or just need some help or want to spitball some ideas. They can go to the AppExchange listing, and I have a link there to my calendar that I have available for Data
Cool.
Fetcher.
Yeah, just look for the solution on the AppExchange, folks, and all that information is written in there. Thank you, Josh. And Eric, I wanted to ask you, so what is the process of contributing to a solution here? Like whether you want to contribute to an existing solution or you have an idea and you want to turn that into a new project maybe that could be offered on Unofficial SF. Has that experience been rewarding for you? Can anybody do it? Do you recommend that everybody does it? And one thing I'm wondering, have you been involved since day one on this Unofficial SF webpage?
No, it was originally started by Alex Edelstein, and when I first started creating some of my components, I had them on my own blog and my own site, and I was communicating back and forth with Alex, and we decided, well, let's get some of these things on Unofficial SF as well as a good way to get broaden the audience as to what's available out there. And ever since then I've been just going to town on this and putting things here, because I think it really does reach a broad audience, and it's great being able to bring a lot of folks in and combine everybody's expertise and creativity to one common place that somebody can go and look when they want to when they want to find some interesting things that they want to do with their flows.
Cool.
So as far as contributing, it's been fairly informal. People have reached out to me directly, reached out to Alex directly. Let's see if let me just show one way that folks can do it. And let me get my screen back here. Bear with me a moment. There we go. Share screen. There. If you go right to the home page on Unofficial SF and scroll down, there's a section here that says feedback and comments. And folks have reached out to me directly, they've reached out to Josh or Alex directly, but this is one place you can go as well. So if you click on feedback and comments, it does list an email address where you can reach out directly, but I think probably the best place is to go to the Trailblazer community. And there's 2 Trailblazer communities that are actively monitored by myself, by Josh, by Alex, by all our users out there. One is there's an Unofficial SF Trailblazer community, and then there's one called Salesforce Automation. And I highly recommend that if you're interested in flows, interested in automation at all, join both of these Trailblazer communities. Someday you'll have some questions, you want to put something out there, but just follow along and see what people are posting and what questions they're asking and how they're being answered, and you'll learn an awful lot from that. So I think this is probably the best way to reach out, to offer something. I had somebody just recently that says, geez, the lookup component documentation can really use some love, and I'm willing to do it. So we're going to be getting him set up with some editing access, and
that's great.
Clean up some of that documentation. I mean, just reach out to the community, reach out to us individually. Anything that can help all of us, we'd certainly like to try and do for you.
And thank you very much, Eric. Josh, did you have anything else to add? Because you talked about your experience a little bit. How has it been for you?
Yeah, I know. Definitely want to second everything that Eric said. The more people involved, the better. I think it's something I really like about just the Salesforce ecosystem as a whole, is that it truly is a community. And encourage everybody to go in there. And like I said, anytime that somebody tags me or sends me a message, I try to at least acknowledge that that I see the message and provide some type of answer. Another place that you can do it too is actually through the GitHub area there that
yes,
that Eric had shown earlier. We have an issues tab on there. So where if you have an idea for an improvement, you can actually submit ideas for improvements on the issues tab, as well as if you run into a bug. I try to be as responsible as possible there as well.
You could get to that for any of the components just by clicking on where you find the link at the bottom of every page for source. It takes you right to that GitHub, and once you're there, if you're not a GitHub user, you have the ability to post a question or a bug or something like that. So that is another good place to reach out and talk to the developers who are creating these components.
Yeah, that's very cool. And we had a couple of questions and comments in particular to the solutions that we have mentioned here. So I encourage the folks to go on the website and then report the bugs and comments the way it is described over here by Josh and Eric, right?
Yep.
So let me just go into some of these comments here maybe and add something. One thing that would be nice, Eric, I just thought of this. Could we possibly give a couple of shout outs to some of the biggest contributors on the website? Who else comes to mind?
Well, I had mentioned Alex Edelstein, who was a VP of product management on the automation team at Salesforce, who has started and maintains this with a lot of his own time. Adam White has done a lot with this website as well. He started as a user contributor when he was working for a Salesforce consulting partner, and now he's the product manager on the for ScreenFlows, and is bringing us all these wonderful things with reactivity. A few other folks. Let me just check. I came across a few today of people who have regularly and have contributed multiple times. Let me just take a quick look.
Sure,
Josh,
yeah,
do you have some other names off the top of your head of?
While you're doing that, let me just say this. I'm going through the comments and there's so much love and so much gratitude towards you and your solutions here. The reactivity, the data table, and all these components that you have contributed. People are saying they couldn't develop the solutions that they have right now in place without your help and support. So you'll read all this stuff later on, but it's really nice. It's really nice to see this feedback. And one question, yeah, go ahead.
That's so nice being able to, because you guys out there, you're facing the same issues, concerns, questions, problems that Josh and I run into, and we have the ability to sometimes solve some of those things and help you out in the process. Then, I mean, as a community, we all grow from that. So I'm more than happy to do it, and I love seeing how people are putting these things to use.
Yeah, I think that's what I would love for more people to share how they're using it. It's something that I would love to see. Because that's really kind of what drives the innovation when I think of things sometimes is when I hear people's problems, or I hear hey, I'm using it in this way, I think of, oh, how can I make that better?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you even see interesting articles there. Jeff Kranz is one name that comes up. He's created some components, but he's also come up with some amazing ideas. And he published a post, I think it was back in August, on how you can add styling to your screen.
Yes.
Kind of tricking Salesforce a little bit and bringing in some of the Lightning Design System, styling hooks and putting them into your flow. And so, just reading articles like that and seeing some examples of some of these fun things that are being done. I mean, it's folks like that are, really helping people grow what they're doing with their flows. It's great.
Okay, there are a couple of comments and questions here. Anything on Omni Studio is the question. Omni Studio.
There are, if we're talking about Omni Studio, in Salesforce Industries, there's a few articles. There's actually some really good posts on the site around using OmniScript inside of Flow Orchestrator or in Flows itself, which is really cool. I've actually referenced that on some Salesforce projects. Interesting enough. And then on the Omni Studio side, it's kind of what Flow FlexCard is based on, is on the OmniScript from Salesforce Industries, and that's where I take a lot of like the inspiration as far as like features I want to add there from OmniString to try to bridge that gap, because not everybody has that tooling inside their org.
And Eric, there's an interesting question here that could actually be a response to many people's questions in their minds as to how these packages really work. Mark says, I upgraded to version 3.15 from version 2.18 of the Flow Base Packs component, Flow Base Packs package. And the old version is still in there. I thought it was going to upgrade it to the new version. Am I safe to uninstall it? You know, would you like to comment on that?
You could try. Well, the nice thing about trying to uninstall something, that if you have a flow, even an inactive old version of a flow that might be using a component, and something you try and uninstall, it'll stop and tell you that it's out there. The reason you're seeing that with the Flow Actions base pack is I had talked a little earlier about the advantages of having a managed package, and version 2 is the older unmanaged version. And you may still have some flows and components out there that might be using that. Version 3 and above is the newer managed package. And when you have a managed package, it uses something called a namespace. So when the code is being called internally, it doesn't just call the name of the component, it calls the namespace and the name of the component together. Which actually keeps it as like a separate component. So the unmanaged package didn't have the namespace. So if you were using one of the actions there, it was without the namespace, and then the managed package has that. So they really are, even though they do a lot of the same things, they're two totally separate packages. And all of the components have been renamed to use the namespace and everything else. So, but in the future, if you go from 3.15 to 3.20, it will replace that and upgrade what you have in place for version 3, but the older version 2, until you uninstall it, is still going to be in your system.
That's cool. Another question for Eric. The validation checker versus the new custom error flow element, what's the difference? Do you think validation checker will become GA and potentially kind of work in conjunction with the custom error?
You know, I don't think so. The new custom error code allows you to do some conditions on there, but and it could possibly end up taking the place of your own validation rules at some point. The validation checker I have checks some other things as well that I think the custom one doesn't surface. And it kind of works behind the scenes to go and see if there's going to be an error or not. If you're doing frigate flows, I recommend as much as possible use the new custom error. If you're just trying to trap something in a screen flow, then I think the validation checker is going to give you a little more power, a little more capability, because it'll do things like if somebody input a value for a field that's longer than what it was defined as in the object manager, or if it failed a duplication rule, or if it had a requirement, if it was a required field from the object manager and you were trying to create a record without a value for it, it'll trap things like that as well. That I don't know if the custom error message component does all of those same checks.
Thank you very much for the response. And Eric says, that's an interesting comment, actually. Maybe he's joking, but I'm serious. Eric says, where is the tip jar for this amazing data table? So, I mean, does this all happen magically for free? Do you need any resources, or is there a Patreon or something? By the way, I don't know. I'm just, posing that question.
It's when I can find free time or have free time, it's a labor of love. So,
thank you.
There is no tip jar. It'd be kind of fun if there was, but I'm trying to keep this, fully open source and available for everybody. So, if you like Steve Moe, if you see me somewhere at a Salesforce conference and want to buy me a beer, I'll say thank you very much. Let's go find the bar.
That's great. That's great. Okay, that's one path.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for all you do. Before we conclude, we have 5 minutes left. I want to also make it clear for everybody, if they need to reach out to you. Josh, how do they find you? Do they go to the AppExchange and then use that link, or how do you want people to contact you?
Yeah, the best ways to get a hold of me are pretty much anyway. I have people that send me messages on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Trailblazer community. People send me messages. I'm on Ohana Slack. I'm on our Flownatics Slack group as well. A few other ones. I think I'm on Wizard of Ops if people are on there. And shoot me a message. I do keep an eye out. I do have some alerts set up to where if it's something from Data Fetcher or something I have on UnofficialSF, I see. I'm probably not as responsive on the comment section of the UnofficialSF site, just because sometimes it's hard to get to on the discuss alert for the component that we use on the WordPress site. So apologize if it's sometimes the delay there. It's just because how that component works. It's not always friendly for the person that it should reach. And then GitHub, if you tag me on GitHub, I get an email alert on there as well.
Yep.
That's
I like
great.
to recommend that a lot of people, I'm on all the same sites as Josh, and a lot of people reach out to me directly, and I'm trying to be as responsive as I can. So but I also recommend that ask your question to a group as well. You can tag me, mention me, on, say, Ohana Slack, for example, or on the Salesforce Automation Trailblazer community. Ask your question there, mention me directly. But oftentimes, other people who are using these components and have knowledge about it could go and answer your questions and provide advice before I might even read the comment or read the question that's out there. So the more you kind of share with the group, don't be embarrassed to ask questions. Everybody has them. Rather than just going after one person like Josh or myself, open it up to the group, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. But other people may be able to help you even sooner.
Yeah, make it public, right?
Other people have the same questions. They may not ask those questions, and people can learn an awful lot from the answers when they finally are posted out there in a public fashion.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say, this exact same thing, that I love the fact that when people ask those questions in public, because so many people learn.
Yes, we all can learn from that. So
yeah, I mean, before we wrap up, I'd like to also point out that Jeff Kranz was actually my guest right before this one. The recording is still out on LinkedIn, on the Salesforce Break YouTube channel as well, so you can go watch that. If you missed any part of this broadcast, this link is going to automatically become a recording on LinkedIn. You can go back and watch it. It's also available. It's going to be available on the YouTube channel, Salesforce Break, as well. And I would like to thank you very much, Josh and Eric, for your contributions and for your time today. It was a delightful discussion today with you.
Glad to be here.
That's fun. Yeah, excited.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.